We miss you, Cole. UFC Fortaleza takes place this weekend, February 2nd. Got it's sneaky, decent card here. You have Junior Albini on the prelims. You have Thiago Alves and Max Griffin on the prelims. You have Marcus Perez, Anthony Hernandez, not to be confused with Alex Hernandez on the ESPN Plus prelims. You have a top 15 in, how do you say her name, Joe? Mara.
Yeah.
Romero
Borella.
There you go. I'm not going to do that one the disservice. What stands out to you on these prelims, James?
I actually really like, there's a couple fights. The Ricardo Ramos and Sadner Magomedov fight at bantamweight is going to be just a killer fight. If you remember, Ramos was supposed to fight Ricky Simone. He had an injury. Now they rebooked him against Nurmagomedov. This should be a banger. Ramos, quite the talent. He could go 4-0 in the UFC here. So lots of interesting stuff there. And then, Biblitov's always exciting. The flyweight, again, it helps to have Ali as your manager because, I'm surprised they have another flyweight fight booked here. But, he's 14-1. He had that upset loss to, Moraga knocked him out. So let's see if he can get back on the winning track here. That's an interesting fight. But the Max Griffin and Thiago Alves fight should be great. Veteran versus sort of an up-and-comer. Griffin is a bit of a veteran at this point as well, but I'm curious to see, does Alves still have it, in terms of the division? He's gone on a bit of a rough stretch, but Griffin, he has that win over Mike Perry, but, he had that loss to Millender in his last fight, so let's see if he can get back on the winning track. Just really interesting fight, and interestingly enough, Hernandez and Perez, two former LFA middleweight champions going to war, which should be interesting. And Hernandez, this is his debut. If you remember, he was supposed to make his debut, I believe, on the Denver card, but he had the suspension for marijuana. So now he's finally making his debut. 6-0, trains with Aspen Ladd at MMA Gold. Should be a good, fun fight there. Two middleweights who are really looking to prove themselves in the division.
Max Griffin has not had an easy go of it when it comes to bookings. In 2015, he ran into TD and Jaquani. 2016, Colby Covington. 2017, Zaleski dos Santos. And last year, Curtis Millender. Oh, by the way, he lost all those fights. So obviously, steps up in competition can be really rough for him. But I don't know that Thiago Alves is that step up in competition, at least anymore. He's won one of his last 5 fights, and Patrick Cote was that win, and Cote retired and joined Fightful immediately after that. So, I'm predicting Griffin to take that one. You have Junior Albini, who's a fringe top 15 heavyweight there, and if he can get a win, that would go along.
What happens if he doesn't get that win? Because that's 3 straight losses.
That's rough for him, especially knowing what we know about him.
Yeah,
about his lifestyle. But I think that he'll probably end up in PFL if he probably PFL or somewhere like that. He'll land on his feet, I think, because I think that TKO win over Timothy Johnson will go quite a ways. People will remember that at the very least. And honestly, he'll probably do pretty well in PFL. Joe, anybody on this UFC Fortaleza prelim card that you're looking forward to seeing? For me, it's my dude Albini. That story tugged at my heartstrings.
Always. It'll always do it, man. And dude, I'm a dad. I know exactly, sometimes the sacrifices you have to make. But I'm more concerned that because of the appreciation we had from him since day one, could be very dangerous right now because, this could be a 3rd straight loss. I don't want to see him go, but he's got to emerge victorious, man. I know he got his neck squeezed out of him in his last fight. And that Arlovsky fight, I think you and I were kind of like, what is he doing? Like, why is he fighting like this, right? So it remains to be seen which Junior Albini mixed martial artist shows up. That's the one that I'm paying attention to. 9 times out of 10, Thiago Alves fights, I'm all over it. He was one of my favorite strikers, or his style, the way he buries his chin behind his shoulders and his elbows when he would strike was always one of my favorites. But Max Griffin, like James said, he's a vet too. People don't realize that, but it's going to be a sick fight. The Ramos Nurmagomedov fight, we're going to be paying attention to that one, kids, because that one's going to be a good scrap. That one will probably steal the show. But
pick him too.
To answer your question, it's Junior Albini. I'd like to see what's going to happen with him.
Here's some of the odds. That Ramos is -115, Nurmagomedov -105, so pick him there. Albini a -115, and Rosenstruck is -105, so another one there. Very, very competitive in that regard. You have Kolaris at a +115, De Freitas -135. Bibilatov is minus 400, by far the biggest favorite on this show. Von Taren plus 325. You have Max Griffin at a minus 210. Thiago Alves plus 175. Santos a minus 160, while Barela is plus 140. I would maybe get in on that. We'll talk about that later. Marcus Perez a plus 150. Hernandez a minus 170. You have Justin Ledet a plus 175. Johnny Walker a God damn it.
Here we go.
210. Oh, damn. Souza a minus 225. Frota a plus 185. James, God damn it. What am I doing?
Here we go.
Don't worry. I'll keep the puns up.
Is there any value on Johnny Walker, even though he'll be expensive?
There's always value on a Johnny Walker.
There's yeah, exactly. There's all, because you never know. I personally, I would take him straight. Minus 210. That's definitely good value on that one. No,
you'll end up on the floor.
Yeah.
I think they know what they're doing here. Okay, let's just look at this from an objective standpoint. Okay, Johnny Walker defeats Khalil Roundtree, who, in my opinion, is was pretty talented himself on The Ultimate Fighter and everything like that. That was a huge win. Now he's fighting Justin Ledet, who I think a lot of people are surprised is still in the organization. This is in Brazil. I think you kind of know what they're doing here. They want him to get another big win here and sort of propel. Now Ledet's got that kind of I got nothing to lose attitude, but for Walker, I mean, he should win this fight, but again, and he's actually has more fights than Ledet. I'm looking here. He's 15-3. I mean, Walker should win, but I don't know. This just seems like it's one of those fights that the UFC sort of is setting up here for Walker to look good. So if you're going to play it straight, if you really want to, yeah, we'll just leave it at that. Yeah, Johnny Walker will probably win that.
Well, Ledet had started off 3-0 in the UFC at heavyweight and then moved down to light heavyweight and got beat by Rakic. I'm a little surprised he hung around at light heavyweight. I figured maybe he would jump back up, but that didn't end up happening. You have Souza, who did win her UFC debut in September. That's good, especially after the hiccup against Angela Hill a couple years back. She is, and not only that, she regularly has like performance of the nights, fights of the nights, and Invicta. And won in 80 seconds via a finish in the UFC. That's a good first impression to make. A guy who constantly makes good impressions and sometimes bad ones, Charles Oliveira, looking to extend his record-setting ways against David Tamer. What are you expecting out of this fight, Joe?
Naturally speaking, you would think that Oliveira's like, I want another submission. That's what he's good at, right? He actually does have good striking. If you go back to when he first got into the UFC, he knew how to use that length versus his opponents. And then as soon as he ran into Jim Miller the first time, that's when things changed because he got tapped out and then, kind of had that up and down run. But this guy's a submission specialist. If he can get a hold of you in some way, somehow. But there was always back in the day, questions about his heart. If you hurt him early and let him force the fight in a different manner, you can knock this guy out, or he'll find a way to get out of the fight. And Tamer has that ability. So I like the fight. I just think Oliveira is going to do anything and everything to continue to pad that record of submissions.
James, this is very much a styles make fight. You have a jiu-jitsu guy in Oliveira. You have an accomplished kickboxer in Tamer who is hard to finish. 5-0 in the UFC. He also went 2-1. But the fight he lost on Tough was only a 2-rounder. So who knows what would have happened with that extra round. It's like I count them if they're finishes, but I don't really count them if they're 2-round majority wins or anything like that. But the odds have Oliveira at minus 120, Tamer at plus 100. I think those are fair. But I want to know the odds that you're giving it that Charles Oliveira says that he wants to move back to featherweight if he wins this fight.
Yeah, minus 1,000 for sure. I mean, that's every fight for him. I get Oliveira being the favorite here, with his experience and obviously his submissions as well, but Tamer's never been submitted in his career. He's a guy that can turn a really exciting fight kind of boring. I mean, you look at the win over Lentz, you look at the win over Jakar Close. I mean, those are good wins. If you look at both those guys, what they've been doing after losing to Tamer, they've been both doing quite well. So I think there is some value here on Tamer, as far as this matchup goes, because while he doesn't have the experience, he is a guy that can always take a fighter out of their element. And that includes Oliveira. If he's able to stuff some of those takedowns and avoid the ground, I think it's a fight that he can win. So, like I said, Oliveira is rightfully the favorite, but don't be surprised if Tamer pulls this one off.
Sneaky good fight here, as is Damian Maia, minus 180 plus Lyman Good, 158. Man, this is Lyman Good's chance. He had the hiccup against Dos Santos. It was a split decision, though, and knowing what we know about Dos Santos, that loss looks a little bit better a year and a half later. He beat Ben Saunders. He beat Andrew Craig, but to me, this is, I can't say the biggest test of his career because he fought Ben Askren. But if he beat Damian Maia, by far the biggest win in his career. And for Damian Maia, Joe, it's a guy who's trying to retain relevance. He's trying to stay around. He's lost 3 fights in a row. Man, I don't know if the UFC would cut him. I don't think they would do that, especially when they're running Brazil shows. But a 4th loss on his record, especially if it's a one-sided loss for Damian Maia, cannot be good. I've got Lyman Good in this fight, though.
Man, look at who those 3 losses were that Damian Maia just lost. Yeah. Tyron Woodley, the world champion. Colby Covington, the interim champion. Kamaru Usman, who's fighting for gold in March. Those are the 3 guys that Damian Maia has lost to. So to hell with the UFC matchmakers if he loses to Lyman Good to cut him. No, I don't think so. That's absolutely not right. Although I do believe that, excuse me, Damian Maia does emerge victorious. So sorry, Sean.
James, what do you think?
Yeah, to me, it's really hard to ignore those losses because they were so high level. You know, if you look at the competition, and then how about some of his wins here recently? You know, George Masvidal, Carlos Condit. I know Condit's had a bit of a rough go, but that Matt Brown one was good. I just think that even though Maia is 41, and in situations like this, you tend to favor the younger fighter. And I know Good, you know, no pun intended, has looked pretty good in his career. I mean, that fight, go watch that fight he had with Askren. I mean, Askren's face was beat up in that one. That was probably a much closer fight than people give it credit for. But I don't like the layoff that he's had. You remember he had that USADA issue. He hasn't fought as much. He's going to Brazil as well, which, I think that does give Maia a bit of an advantage there. I'm going Maia in this one. I have to. I'm kind of going in the opposite of what I said in the last fight because, Maia clearly has the experience here, but
sure.
I think Maia pulls this one off. I think he'll get, listen, I'll predict this. I think he's going to get the win by decision. I don't think he'll get a submission, and I think he retires. I'm going to call it right now.
1 second.
Wow.
That's a good call, James. Wow. Okay. Of those 3 losses, guys, each one went to the decision. He didn't get finished. He went to the decision with those 3 guys. So,
well, that's the case with Lyman Good as well. When he loses, he's losing to pretty good fighters. Dos Santos, Andrei Koreshkov, Ben Askren. You got the Rick Hahn fight in there too, but that was a very, very close fight. I get the feeling we're in for a 15-minute fight here, and might not exactly be a crowd pleaser. You speak about retiring, James. Jose Aldo says that he is retiring. He is a plus 105 underdog against Moicano. Whew! Never thought I'd see the day where a 32-year-old Jose Aldo would be an underdog. And it's against Moicano. Now, the only people to beat Jose Aldo since 2006 are Max Holloway and Conor McGregor. Before I even break this down, which way are you leaning?
I'm leaning Moicano in this fight, but I think that the value certainly is on Aldo. And actually, there was a point, I believe, when he fought Jeremy Stevens where he was an underdog and then it flipped back again. The thing that I look at here is just that at some point, Aldo's got to slow down a little bit. I realize he's not that old, but you do look at the damage. You do look at, some of the things he's had to overcome, just mentally losing the way he did against Conor. His last fight certainly silenced a lot of those critics, but I think Moicano is just getting better and better. His only loss is to Ortega. This guy was the backup for Holloway, and Ortega when they were fighting. Clearly, his record speaks for itself. I was just so impressed even last year, that win he had over Calvin Kattar, how dominating he was. I think he's ready. And he said it, in an interview where he's just like, it's my time. I'm the younger guy. I'm ready to do this. I think he does it here. But saying that, I think the value here is on Aldo just because of his experience and everything else. So if you're going to bet this fight, definitely go Aldo. But I think Moicano pulls this off.
Jose Aldo is a rare, I got 5 on it for me. I'll give my picks. A rare, I got 5 on it at plus 105. Joe, you've been covering Jose Aldo for a very, very long time. He's got a lot of tools that would almost seem overpowered to some degree. You look at a guy, that body composition and what he specializes in, and you think, well, he shouldn't be as good at that. He shouldn't be as good at that. But it's a question of when and how much those skills have diminished. Now, that being said, Jose Aldo can still beat people. We know that. I mean, we've seen that. He beat Jeremy Stevens, flattened him in July. He says he's wrapping up his career. We'll talk about that in a moment, but I want to know how you feel about this fight.
It's a tough one to break down, logistically, because when you take a look at who Jose Aldo Jr. actually is, your brain goes into like nobody can beat this guy other than Conor McGregor and Max Holloway. But he's not getting any younger. And Moicano, and let's be honest, despite the 2 Max Holloway defeats, there's always going to be guys that have your number. Max Holloway clearly has Aldo Jr.'s number, but he comes back and he, like you said, flattens Jeremy Stevens, who was on a pretty spectacular run at the time. I mean, he had 3 straight wins at that time. Now, were they world-class opponents? Maybe you could make the argument no, but Josh Emmett was pretty damn good. Duhoi Choi was fantastic, and Gilbert Melendez at the time, took a beating in his legs, right? So, but then you take a look at Moicano, and with Moicano, taking out Cub Swanson is very, very impressive, as is Calvin Kattar, although that one was a decision. So it's a tough fight to break down. I'm still going to lean towards Jose Aldo Jr., but be interesting to see if Moicano can do this and how the Brazilian fans react and how the UFC reacts and what could be next for Aldo. I still firmly believe that at some point he's going to have to make that decision to move up to 155 pounds if he wants to continue his career.
Jose Aldo opted to take a 3-round fight instead of a 5-round fight, says that he's going to retire at the end of the year. We'll reassess this. Don't know if we're doing a post-show live or if we'll cover it next week, but that will definitely be a hot topic of conversation, win or lose, because otherwise UFC is kind of, I don't know, a bit of a benefit when booking him if he's announced his retirement, because you don't have to put him in a title contending fight. I mean, if he wants to fight 3 more times, you can give him just some absolute scrub as a showcase in Brazil to end his year, but we'll see how that all ends up. No scrubs involved in Rafael Assuncao and Marlon Moraes. I wouldn't be mad if either one of these had got a title shot. And quite frankly, I feel for these guys. I feel for both of these guys that their division has not only been held up because of the Dillashaw-Cejudo fight, but now because of TJ Dillashaw's probable stubbornness in not accepting a loss. Who knows if either one of these men will actually get a title shot. We have Marlon Moraes, who probably should have won their last fight, Joe, but didn't. What adjustments do you think that he has made to ensure that he doesn't have a victory taken from him?
Yeah, that was an extremely close fight, and I think you and I both scored it for Marlon back in the day. That was 2017 June. So
he's a minus 170 favorite over Assuncao plus 150 right now.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, and James, I'm not sure if you'll agree, but I got this as a pick 'em. But these guys are that close in my opinion, and that skilled. We saw what happened in the first one. It was a very close fight, but I think Marlon did do enough to earn the victory. The difference is that was a headliner on a Fox. This is a main event. This is a 5-round fight. So this is the opportunity now for Marlon to not only redeem that loss, but don't be in a rush, man. Don't be in a rush, because we see how explosive he can be in the opening minutes of a fight. Assuncao is going to just be calm. Assuncao can stay in that 3rd gear the minute that fight starts and just cruise all the way for 25 minutes unless a finish presents itself. So I think we're going to see a very methodical fight here. I mean, it could be wrong. It's a fight, right? But a very methodical fight unless something presents itself. So look for these guys to slightly win 10-9 rounds each, and I think the final round will determine who's going to win this fight. It's going to be a fantastic fight because they're so evenly matched, and I think it's going to be great.
James, 80% of fans and 95% of media gave the first fight to Moraes. Assuncao, one of the big questions I had, and I'll never forget, it was the talking point the week that we launched Fightful. Assuncao hadn't fought in almost 2 years, and he had a really bad ankle injury. And his first opponent back was TJ Dillashaw. And I'm thinking, man, you had a major ankle injury. You're fighting at 135, and that's the guy they put you up against. And based on the performances against Sterling and Moraes, it did seem like it took a little while for him to get his legs back underneath him, because that is not a division to be in if you have this restricted footwork and you have a lingering ankle injury. Well, the Matt Lopez fight, he picked up a big KO. He really made an impact on Rob Font, but
underline that performance.
But we're running this one back for a year and a half later. As close as I think the skill set is, I think some of the physical tools favor Marlon Moraes, but I want to know what you think.
Yeah, this really comes down to just I think they're both equally skilled. I just think that if you look at the two, Moraes has got that power factor, and so at any point in the fight he can't end it. Whereas Assuncao, he does have that win, but he only seems to get finishes over lower level competition. A lot of his wins are by decision. They're close fights. I mean, we can't ignore them either. That win over Rob Font just back in July or whenever it was, that was an impressive win. I mean, Rob's a really top guy in that division. Moraes, I mean, he's just looked unstoppable. It's almost like losing that fight actually made him more motivated because the finishes he got after that have just been amazing, especially the Jimmy Rivera one. Rivera was on a huge winning streak, and then he went out there and finished him in 33 seconds. So I'm going to favor Moraes, but again, it's one of those situations where I think there is some value on Assuncao because he is one of those guys that can bring you into his world, make it kind of a boring fight, and pull off a decision here. I do got to point this out though in the first fight. I know, like I thought Assuncao won the fight, but I thought it was funny that Ali, Moraes' manager, said, "Oh, the judges were just biased." Well, they're both Brazilian. So how is one biased over the other? So I thought that was funny. But we could expect to see another close fight here. But I think the fact that it is a little bit longer, Moraes could get in there and finish this fight. So I'm gonna pick Moraes, but I think the value on this fight is on Assuncao.